Madam Chancellor, platform party, graduands, and respected guests. I'm privileged to summarize why Harvey Secter is being awarded an honorary degree. I worked closely with him for most of my time as president and vice chancellor, and I have a great personal respect for him and for his commitment to this institution. Chancellor Secter's formal connection to the University of Manitoba began when he entered the Bachelor of Commerce program. After completing those studies, he left to work in, expand, and eventually preside over the family's business, the nationally successful clothing chain Ricki's Canada. Throughout his life, he's followed the example of philanthropic generosity that he saw in his parents, Joseph and Gwendolyn. After 25 years, he returned to UM to study law, receiving the gold medal in his graduation year, and later a Master of Laws from Harvard Law School. He went on to become a member of the Faculty of Law here at the University of Manitoba, and then Dean of Law some years later. He returned to his alma mater again, this time to serve as Chancellor for 9 years, which was, in my opinion, perhaps the greatest gift he's given to this city and this province. As Chancellor, he was Honorary Chair of UM's Front and Centre campaign to raise a target of $500 million that eventually resulted in $626 million. But he treated that role as more than an honorary one. While many worked hard to achieve the goal, Chancellor Secter's reputation, the respect that he has in the community, and his persuasive, quiet wisdom were critical factors in that success. More broadly, he and his wife Sandra have supported provincial universities, hospitals, performing and creative arts, the Jewish Foundation, and, I'm sure, other organizations unknown to me. Generosity characterizes them both. Harvey's contributions have also been recognized by the University of Winnipeg, the Association of Fundraising Professionals, the Jewish National Fund, the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg, and the Order of Manitoba. Lieutenant Governor Janice Fillman stresses his wisdom and vision. Senator Patricia Bovey, past chair of UM's Board of Governors, speaks of his sage counsel and leadership. Janice Letterman, another Board of Governors chair during his time, says that he's shown us how truly invaluable the role of the Chancellor can be. Harvey also regularly encourages others to take leadership in philanthropic roles. For example, he's advised new graduates to get involved in such matters, to be generous, and to experience what they will be given when they themselves give. I'm particularly pleased to present these remarks because I personally benefited from the 9 years of his term, from his wise counsel, sometimes in his office or home, sometimes in mine, sometimes over a meal. I'm thankful for his continuing friendship and advice. Madam Chancellor, on behalf of the Senate of the University, I ask that you convey on Harvey Secter the degree Doctor of Laws, honoris causa.
By virtue of the authority vested in me as Chancellor of this university, I admit you to the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, with all the rights and privileges thereto appertaining.
Now my pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Harvey Secter to address Convocation.
Thank you, Mr. President, Madam Chancellor, President Emeritus, Dr. Barnard. I can think of no better way to have received this award than from some of the people with whom I've had the chance to work so closely over this past few years. It was strangely familiar yesterday to be on campus for the first time since the fall of 2019. The installation of President Benarosh was a wonderful event, though it was occurring some 2 years after originally scheduled. As the President pointed out, it was a graphic reminder of both the magnitude of the disruption we've all been facing during the pandemic, and yet a glimmer of optimism that just maybe this time we are starting to get back to a more familiar pattern of activity. Throughout the pandemic, we've all had to pivot, adapt, and learn to do things differently, not only in our academic careers, but also in our medical, business, social, and community lives. As the President said, while completing the requirements to graduate have never been easy, in my 60-year connection with the University of Manitoba, I'm not aware of any class that has had to face the challenges you've endured to be here today. Each of you deserves an award for extraordinary resilience and perseverance, and I'm thrilled to be an honorary member of the class of 2022. Herb Simon, a famous American Nobel laureate, once said that 85% of someone's success can be attributed to when and where they were born. I was born in Brandon in 1944, and it's hard to imagine a more opportune time or place to have started this all out. I was part of that generation that grew up in the happy days environment of the 50s, graduated in the 60s, and prospered during the heady growth years that we experienced during the second half of the 20th century. While the realities we experienced frequently exceeded our fantasies, we find ourselves now living in a world where the prospects for future generations seem much less bright than we thought they would be. The post-war economic boom in North America that we experienced saw incomes rise quickly and steadily, creating unprecedented opportunities, particularly for those of us who were able to go to university when many fewer did. There was a growing sense of a distinct Canadian identity in the 1960s that was based on universal medical coverage, a more generous approach to social support structures, and low-cost, accessible post-secondary education. But it wasn't all perfect, because at the same time, many Canadians were blissfully unaware, if not willfully blind, to the fact that our Indigenous neighbours were systematically excluded from many of those benefits, and discrimination against many groups, such as the LGBT community, were still entrenched. Technology and social media had not yet come to dominate our lives, because personal computers didn't come out till the 1980s. And in what was the most prescient thing of all, the Time Person of the Year Award on the cover of the magazine in 1982, rather than showing a person, showed a computer. Cell phones didn't arrive till the 1970s, and it wasn't until the 1990s when Motorola came out with their flip phone that they started to really become a popular item. I can't help but contrast that to what I see happening in the 2020s. As you all know, we've all experienced the most severe pandemic in over 100 years, and COVID may yet be part of our lives for many years to come. Civil rights issues still seem to dominate the news. In the US, though, it seems to be a fear for their loss rather than pride in their growth. In Canada, the promise generated by the launch of the TRC in 2007 and the initial enthusiasm for its calls to action have been tempered by growing frustration over the delays and inaction in making that promise a reality. It now seems that Roe v. Wade, the 1973 landmark decision of the Supreme Court in the US, may not yet survive to reach its 50th anniversary next year. The widespread economic prosperity I referred to that we thought was normal in the 60s is increasingly being replaced by an increase in income inequality and a growing concentration of wealth in the hands of fewer and fewer. Universal health care is often now referred to as being equally inaccessible to all, with unconscionably long wait times, overcrowded emergency rooms, and hospitals with a shortage of both beds and trained personnel. Reduced funding, coupled with increased government control, seem to threaten both the autonomy of post-secondary institutions and student access to them. Recent weather patterns and natural disasters provide increased proof that environmental change is not just an academic issue. Recent gas prices and gaps on supermarket shelves show the widespread effects on war, regardless of where they occur. And even more concerning, the consequences that are much more tragic in parts of the world that seem to be the least able to cope with them. We're even becoming aware of the unintended consequences created by our excessive use of technology. I was amazed to read that an app marketed as a way to expedite getting your coffee fix was actually recording users' personal data without their knowledge, let alone their consent. Some 70 years after George Orwell published 1984, the expression, "Big Brother is watching you," might just be taking on a new and ominous significance. All these issues seem to be occurring at a time when increased polarized political structures, both in Canada and around the world, seem less and less capable of responding adequately or effectively. I take some comfort, though, in something that David Matthews of the Kettering Foundation wrote just around the turn of this century, when he said, "Democracies need something more than written constitutions, free elections, and representative governments. They also depend on a strong public life, a rich depository of social capital, a sense of community, and a healthy civil society." While Herb Simon might have been right that there's a direct correlation between where and when we're born and the life we live, it doesn't fully answer the question why. I think my generation has given itself too much credit for the successes that we experienced in our time, and I think the current generation bears very little responsibility for many of the challenges we're now facing. The conditions that informed our lives were primarily created by the previous generation. Those of us born in the 40s and 50s are responsible for many of today's conditions, both good and bad. And it'll be your generation that will be held accountable for what's yet to come. I believe Robert Kennedy was right when he said, "Few may have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events. And in the total of all those acts will be written the history of this generation." Each of us has a role and a responsibility. As President Barnard said, I was introduced to community life initially by my late parents. In the 1970s, when I was starting out in business, many of us young Turks at the time were mentored, encouraged, and supported by the seniors in the community. But they didn't give us an option of whether or not we should get involved. I'm glad they didn't. That involvement proved to be educational for many of us, was personally developmental, and in hindsight provided many of the most satisfying experiences of our lives. It also taught me that you can do well by doing good. When I think back, I know of no one whose professional or commercial success was compromised by their community service. If people like you and me are going to try and address the challenges and preserve the good things that we face, I thought it might be useful to recall some of what I learned from that diverse group of mentors that I met and benefited from some 40 or 50 years ago, as we set out to build what we thought would be a more civil society. Hopefully, it'll have some applicability, even if the times are different and the context is not quite the same. The first lesson that I recall learning was that being an effective contributor was totally unrelated to age, gender, race, or ethnicity. Neither was it related to level of education, area of discipline, or some natural God-given talent. The most common traits seem to be personal character, a sense of deep commitment to the community, creative thinking, and moral courage. The professional and volunteer leaders who introduced me to community service were all people of strong personal character. They had a deep sense of purpose, a clear sense of what they were trying to achieve, and a determination to persevere until they got there, despite the inevitable obstacles. They all seemed to be guided by a personal moral compass, They may not have always had the right answers, but they were always pursuing the right things. They were authentic, both in walking the talk and performing at high levels consistently over time, because big challenges rarely lend themselves to quick fixes. When they were recognized for their individual contributions, inevitably, they would acknowledge the critical roles that others played in their success, whether it be partners, parents, family, friends, and colleagues, teachers, mentors, and collaborators. We would all do well to remember that and to recognize those contributions that others have made for our success, both privately and publicly. They all seem to possess a level of dedication, determination, and resilience, much like President Benarosh referred to the members of this class and what was required to complete your degrees. They taught us that success doesn't come from the avoidance of mistakes, setbacks, or even failures. Rather, it's the refusal to be defeated by them that is the hallmark of truly successful people. They were inevitably creative thinkers, exemplifying the George Bernard Shaw line that some may see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and ask, why not? While dreamers knew that creative breakthroughs, those proverbial eureka moments, may be wonderful, they also require enormous perseverance. It's a reminder of the expression, success is often 10% inspiration, but 90% perspiration. As agents of change, they were courageous, even though their personal safety may not have been at risk. A reminder that what Hemingway wrote in Farewell to Arms when he said, moral courage is the one essential vital quality of those who seek to change a world in which yields most painfully to change. Change requires not just seeing things differently, but a will to do things in a way that may differ from the conventional wisdom. I know that from my experience, we can address these challenges without compromising the goals we have for our personal and professional lives. Maya Angelou said, success is ultimately liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. So I congratulate you all. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your class. I wish you good luck in finding that Angelou kind of success in the future. And just remember that if each of us commits to trying to change even a small portion of events, collectively, the history of this next generation will record that we helped build a more civil society. What a great legacy to leave for the next generation. Congratulations, best of luck. Thank you, Megwich, merci.